Few vascular surgeons have done more to transform our understanding of aneurysmal disease and the application of endovascular technology in its repair than Roy Greenberg. He was a true visionary and an unparalleled innovator with more than 50 patents, despite his unfortunately short career. Our society recognized the contributions of Dr. Greenberg and honored him in 2012 with the SVS Medal for Innovation. Most of us who knew Roy and considered him a friend remember him fondly not only for his breakthrough contributions and profound caring for the well-being of his patients, but also for his kindness, humility, infectious smile, and boundless enthusiasm for education and mentoring. In honor of his legacy, the SVS established the Roy Greenberg Distinguished Lectureship to celebrate innovation in our field. I know of no one who exemplifies the qualities of Roy Greenberg better than our speaker this year, Dr. Michael Dake, who revolutionized the endovascular management of acute aortic dissections with stent grafts, implanting the world's first homemade devices at Stanford in 1992. His innovations have saved countless patients from the deadliest of aortic emergencies. He is a pioneer in several other image-guided therapies, but most importantly, a leader in disseminating knowledge and skills all over the globe, recognizing no specialty boundaries. He is an internist and a pulmonologist, a radiologist, yet a faculty member of many surgical departments and a member of our Society for Vascular Surgery. His enormous body of published work has earned more than 30,000 citations with an H-index of 103. He holds 41 U.S. patents and founded 5 companies. He is also an art lover, a sports aficionado, a wine expert, and best of all, a down-to-earth friend to many of us. Dr. Dake has recently brought his immense expertise and leadership skills to the University of Arizona, where he now serves as the Senior Vice President for Health Sciences overseeing 7 professional schools. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Michael Dake. His Greenberg lecture today is entitled, "Same as it ever was, but different."
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and I want to thank you, Mac, for your kind introduction. And I'd like to congratulate you on your presidency in the wildly successful Foundation Gala last night. I think we all enjoyed that. I would like to start our time together on a philosophical note. It's a common sentiment that happiness seems to be in short supply today, with acrimony, incivility, and bad behavior permeating society and the media from the highest echelons of government here in Washington on down. Yet happiness has always been something distinctly coveted by Americans. The inalienable right to pursue liberty was enshrined by Thomas Jefferson in our Declaration of Independence. If we are to pursue it, however, we need to define it and to understand what Jefferson really meant by happiness. We must turn to thinkers who influenced him, the Greek philosophers who lived in the 4th and 5th centuries BC. This is the School of Athens, a painting by Raphael done between 1509 and 1511. It's located in the Apostolic Palace in the Vatican. It's probably one of the most famous frescoes in the world. As you can see here, this is a dedicated sort of a visual pantheon of the giants of classical philosophy. I can show you here that this is Socrates here in the green, and walking hand to hand together are Plato and Aristotle. Today there's no shortage of books, advice, self-help, media, to really show us how ancient wisdom can change our lives. If there's one philosophical nugget most people know by heart and learned in high school, it is Socrates, "The unexamined life is not worth living." Now here's Socrates Plato, and Aristotle. And Aristotle didn't equate really happiness with wealth, pleasure, or fame. For him, happiness was an eternal state of mind, a felicity or contentment that we acquire only by living in the best way possible. Real happiness, Aristotle believed, comes from a continuous effort to become the best possible version of yourself. Like his teacher, Plato, and Plato's own teacher, Socrates, he subscribed to the ancient proverb engraved over the oracle at Delphi, "Know thyself." Roy Greenberg knew himself and his position in the world and lived his life in the best way possible. A true giant in our field who was taken too soon, he knew well what happiness means. As dedicated as he was in pursuit of therapeutic solutions and training of the next generation of vascular specialists, he was more devoted to his family and to his friends. He was a creative genius and a quintessential master innovator. He had a high degree of skill and flair that he generously shared, and to all of us who are blessed to know him, he will always be our ultimate talent and supreme role model. That's why it's such a personal pleasure and honor to present this year's Greenberg Lecture. Roy always had an eye to the future, and this memorial lecture typically features a forward-looking theme. In line with this, I would like to spend this morning's time exploring the future of medicine and the role of innovation in addressing some of the inevitable challenges that will impact us all. This phrase was first penned by a Ming Dynasty author, Feng in his book entitled Stories to Awaken the World, published in 1627. Although it could be viewed as a good luck wish or fortunate prophecy, actually many of you know that it was meant as a curse. Better to be a dog in a peaceful time than to be a human in a chaotic period, read warring period back in the Ming Dynasty. Today, like decades and even centuries ago, we find that indeed, like it or not, we live in interesting times and appreciate the widespread wisdom of this ancient quote. There are times of danger and uncertainty, but they are also more open to the creative energy of men and women than any other time in history. As we stand at the threshold of the fourth industrial revolution, we in the health sciences are experiencing already an exponential accelerated conversion of physical science, life science, and data science, fueled by advances in engineering and computing. Let me take you back now to another period in history. 30 years ago, I began my career at Stanford in the midst of interesting times, marked by a startup revolution fueled by creative and innovative thinking. At that time, embedded in the Silicon Valley, we had Sun, we had Cisco, we had HP, Intel, Facebook, Google, and Yahoo. When I came to Stanford in 1989, I moved into an office across the street from the hospital. As you can see, this was called the Lathrop Building, and the address you can see below. As I was moving into my second floor office, there were people moving out, and they were carrying boxes, etc., and I didn't know or didn't care who necessarily they were, but sometime later, I recognized the address on the first Apple operation manual. That's right, the same building, the same floor, the same offices that I was moving into. So by no effort of my own, I tend to be immersed in this Silicon Valley world of innovation. So that's what we're going to talk about this morning. This is in Wisconsin. This is at the headquarters of General Electric Medical Systems. This is their address, Innovation Drive. Obviously, every year the Wall Street Journal has an innovation issue. If you go to the Beijing airport, innovation is one of their main watchwords. Presidents talk about it, like John Hennessy at Stanford, promoting and sustaining innovation, lessons from Stanford and Silicon Valley, and every year the Cleveland Clinic has a medical innovation summit. Well, I don't know if innovation can save the world, but if there were such a thing, I would assume this word has been basically the most commonly used cliche of the last 2 decades. Let's talk about the strategic environment for biomedical research and healthcare delivery and some of the disruptive forces and new opportunities for innovation in our field. You won't know this man. He's one of the original madmen. This was a gentleman, Carl Alley, who was the head of the advertising company that coined the first Federal Express, absolutely positively has to get there overnight, fast talking. And he says, the innovative person wants to be a know-it-all. He wants to know about all kinds of things, ancient history, 19th century mathematics, current manufacturing, flower arranging, and hog futures, because he never knows when these ideas might come together to form a new idea. It may happen 6 minutes later, or 6 months, or 6 years down the road, but he has the faith that it will happen. Here's another advertising executive, Robert Weider, and he said, anyone can look for fashion in a boutique or history in a museum. The creative explorer looks for history in a hardware store and fashion in an airport. He's also the author of one of my favorite quotes of all time, which is, never get deeply in debt to someone who cried at the end of Scarface. So what is the future of healthcare innovation of the next 50 years? Well, Judah Folkman, who we all know, said there are no experts on the future. So let's look at some specific themes that will influence healthcare over the next 50 years. Demographic swell of patient population. That's right, in the year 2050, there will be over 2 million people age 100. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, if I met someone age 100, this was almost, it was amazing. You know, you wanted to hear everything that happened to them. You couldn't believe that they were alive. One of the consequences of that, however, not the only one, is that healthcare spending to treat elderly individuals is causing a growth in the U.S. economy's GDP spent on health. And yes, it's fair to say that in the last 2 years we've bent the curve a little. It's no longer going up the same slope. But if you look at the per capita spent on health care today in the U.S., it is still going up, and clearly we're the highest in the world. The reason for that is obviously entitlements. As you can see, Medicare and Medicaid are the two of the largest increase entitlements, as you can see, from 35% up to 56%. And bringing it closer to home, you can see in 1986, roughly 19% of the household income went to entitlements, and today it's 34%. When my parents were contemplating retirement, there were about 5 working individuals to support their Social Security and their retirement. 2025, that'll be down to 2. Is this image on the left a metaphor for our future? Well, if you read the New York Times business section yesterday, you would see this headline, "Retirees at Risk, Crisis Looms for Social Security Recipients." Next theme, chronic degenerative diseases prevail. We're well aware of this, whether it's cancer, neurodegeneration, diabetes, obesity, mental illness. This is causing a real stress on our economy. 83% of patients 83% of healthcare spending is spent on people with chronic conditions. We know that. And what are the chronic conditions? It's not some vague list. This is the list right here. It can change, but these are the things which constitute for Medicare and Medicaid the chronic conditions. And it's such that by 2/3 of Americans over 65 and 3/4 over 80 have multiple chronic diseases, and by 2020 the number of people with chronic conditions is expected to rise to 157 million from 125 million. Personalized medicine replaces population medicine. Well, we used to think about it this way, but now it's reality. You can call it any way you want. Some people talk about P4 medicine, which is predictive, preventative, personalized, and participatory, but of course all of us, if we're in academics, always live with this term, precision medicine. And one of the most prominent examples of aspirational targets of precision medicine is, of course, the liquid biopsy to diagnose cancer. There are many companies. This one called Grail, which is out in Silicon Valley, has a multi-billion-dollar evaluation. And again, the challenge is to detect cancer cells and proteins that are shed into the peripheral blood with a simple blood draw. And academics are involved in this. Here's the Johns Hopkins project, which is entitled Thrive. And we even in Arizona have our own, which is called Desert DX. Everyone's pursuing this. And again, it's an example of why the globalized, personalized medicine market is just exploding and at a very high slope. Obviously, the convergence of precision medicine and digital medicine is extremely important. We live this every day. I think that we all know that we don't understand why people do what they do. The fact is they do, and now we have all of these actions can now be traced and measured with unprecedented precision, such that every monitored event is a potential data point, whether it's clinical or non-clinical. Every individual is a data node, every individual is a research asset, and every individual is their own control. The CMO of Humana says, I don't think of Humana so much as an insurance company, as an IT company, who is helping us with the data that we need in order to deal with our population health tools. Restoration replaces palliation. Well, in the future, all of these chronic degenerative diseases are going to require, or many of them will require implants. I'm having a total knee next month, and looking forward to getting back on my feet and able to do some things I've been limited by. But in the future, we're going to see this go up to 5 million patients per year. In both vascular surgery and interventional radiology, I think we have a challenge to inspire to go beyond our franchise of palliative care. That means we need to strive to find technologies that share a vision to return function, replace what is missing, or restore what is lost. Example of this, and one of the more prominent ones, is in the area of neuromodulation, whether it's pacing, or stimulation, or ablation. Part of that I've seen as you can fuel is look at this evolution in pacing systems since 2007, up to 2017 from 1960, and this extreme scaling of implanted device. This is what's going to propel this forward. No longer are we running around with big, deep pockets subcutaneously. These are very small devices, downsized by our ability to decrease battery size, increase throughputs through smaller modular systems. This is obviously a few years old now, but this is a pediatric LVAD, and you can see here is the, let me get my, that's the sewing ring obviously, and this exhaust comes back up and goes into the ascending aorta, but you can see the size of that. And they're adult ones now. The hardware by Medtronic is very small, again, not requiring a big subcutaneous pouch. Imaging and navigation facilitates less invasive diagnosis and treatment. Obviously, image fusing is helping all of us in many specialties. Obviously, in this case, we see an example of fluoro CT and ultrasound image guidance being fused and then combined with electromagnetic tracking to do a more accurate, risk-free biopsy. Angiographic perfusion displays, whether it's a tumor or in lower extremity perfusion, are new tools that are really helping us in terms of optimizing endpoint analysis in our cases. And of course, robotics, again, we're all aware of the potential to decrease risk, errors, and complications during catheterizations, and I think the potential for robotics is out there. I just thought I'd show this one thing too, because we're doing this in Arizona, and that's handheld guidance with your smartphone. You plan a needle path at the CT console, you set the plane angle on the smartphone, calibrate the smartphone to the CT scanner, and then you can do your biopsy under guidance on your phone. Cost containment dominates. How are we going to get all these implantable devices, all these biologics, all these communication technologies, all these new nanotechs, IT bioinformatics, imaging and navigation at a cost that we can afford? Obviously, a daunting challenge. I think one way to look at it is I think we're going to see a new class of devices that are sort of geospecific, designed not as dumbed-down tools or devices, but actually focused on understanding the needs of different continents and countries with an eye towards extreme affordability, example of which might be the $100 laparoscope. But in our field, it could just as easily be the $500 aortic endograft or the $800 transcatheter cardiac valve. Consumer-driven healthcare emerges. This is a big element in the next 50 years. And you see some of the, I won't say the consequences, but some of the effects of that. This is a home defibrillator. And you can go on Costco and buy this for $11.99.99, or you can comparison shop and go on Amazon and get it for $10.99.99. In either case, you can have it in your home, and it's generating a lot of interesting questions that really we've never had to deal with before. This is sort of an extreme example. Why is a prescription no longer needed? Can the Philips HealthStart home defibrillator be used in children? And again, one of my favorites, can I use the Philips HealthStart home defibrillator on myself? But there's no denying that healthcare spending is increasing and shifting to consumers. As you can see here, this is the annual health insurance premium graph, and above it you can see employee contributions, which have gone up from 14% in 1999 to 18% in 2017. And perhaps more close to home, at least for me, I understand that deductibles are going up. This is the percentage of individuals who, in terms of their health care plans, have to pay at least a $2,000 deductible. That's gone up from 7% in 2009 to 22% in 2017. Now, when consumers start spending more, they tend to pay more attention to value and prices. The question obviously is, will market forces finally come to healthcare and drive prices lower for consumers? Well, I think patients are increasingly developing consumer expectations. Modern retail experiences, digital engagement, on-demand access, vertical expertise, transparent pricing, and simple payments. Here are just some examples from modern retail expertise. Look at the number of office locations for this one entity, One Medical, digital healthcare management, on-demand pharmacies. Obviously, there are lots of places where you can get women's healthcare advice, and also men's healthcare device focused on that, where you can get prescriptions online, etc., transparent pricing, simplified healthcare billing. In any event, it's potential that we are really on the cusp of reducing consumer healthcare spending. This is what we do at the University of Arizona. On August 10th, with our new classes coming in, every one of the 42,000 undergrads and 10,000 graduate students will have primary care on their phone. Now, I'm just going to show you a little how that works, and you can watch on the screen. Starts with a chat bot, back and forth. Student's been out hiking, student has a rash Monday morning, supposed to go to a test, don't want to go to the doctor in this. This chat bot brings it up to actually an Arizona State licensed physician. So if you're a full-time student at the University of Arizona, even if that's online and you're living in Maine or Hawaii, you have access to this. Log in, and then you have a physician. Again, all these physicians are licensed in 50 states, and that brings sort of the collateral question of the new specialty of telemedicine virtualists in terms of physician practice. Looking beyond tomorrow, where do we go from here? Well, I did some medical training in Texas, and I used to be at the VA exposed to a lot of backcountry aphorisms, and this is one of them. If all you ever do is all you've ever done, then all you'll ever get is all you've ever got. Communication, information technologies converge. This is perhaps, everyone is well aware of this. Healthcare beyond the clinic, changing the touch points in healthcare delivery, remote health status monitoring beyond just primary care, but monitoring of established disease, whether it's heart failure, diabetes, etc. These are the wearable and health status monitoring opportunities that we have now, and there are many more to come for sure. As you well know, 200 apps are added each day, and there are over 327,000 apps available now. 370 consumer wearable devices are now available. Most of them, of course, we know where they started. They started with fitness, diet, and exercise, but they're moving now into real health status. You can get your EKG on a phone. This is the new Holter monitor. Remember the old days where you had to carry around this sort of box on your belt? Now this is simply looks like a Band-Aid, and it can be remotely monitored. My son's an ophthalmologist. They're involved in this thing where you have on your contact lens intraocular pressure devices if you have narrow-angle glaucoma. And this in our field is something that you may have heard about is graft work. It's a sensor that's on a dialysis graft. It can measure all these metrics to predict if there's going to be a impending failure, etc. Sensors are everywhere. In 2030, all of these things will be easily monitored from a remote site. And it's just the tip of the iceberg. Why is this going to happen? It's going to happen because basically there are more cell phones in the world than there are shoes right now. Everyone is connected. This is just your cell phone. Look at all the opportunities in the cell phone, all the capabilities that exist that just have to be utilized, coordinated, and tuned. And again, because of that, all of these things are going to be possible with implantable and wearable devices. Obviously, the portability is something that we're all looking at, and these are, again, some of the most obvious connectivity opportunities across diseases. Now, this isn't lost on payers and healthcare delivery systems. The healthcare space is expanding, and last year, for the third year in a row, there were more virtual consults at Kaiser Permanente than there were actually face-to-face in-person visits. This is our Arizona telemedicine network. We happen to be blessed to have the oldest telemedicine network in the country, and it's a big state, and we run a massive control center where we do telegenetic counseling, all sorts of stuff all over the state. This is going to be an increasingly big deal, and I think the opportunities for telemedicine and vascular surgery are yet to be fully explored. I wear this watch every day. This is a Samsung Gear 3 watch. You may all have Apple watches. You can do your EKG for 30 seconds on this. We're doing a study with Samsung. This is a 24/7 monitoring. 24/7. We're doing studies for occult atrial fibrillation, episodic tachyarrhythmias in patients post-MI, finding a lot of interesting things. It goes immediately up the crowd, and if you're an individual who's not tech savvy, it doesn't matter. You just put on the watch and it takes care of all of that for you. These are my tracings. This is someone who does happen to have a lot of paroxysmal events, and you can see in this scatter plot here the diversity of individual points. And again, we're seeing this come out. This is the Consumer Electronics Show. It's a sort of a pavilion that they had for the first time, which was devoted exclusively to home health devices. And so clearly this is coming fast, and it's penetrating because although these others are large market incentives, cell phones, advertising, flat panel displays, there's no market larger than the global healthcare market at $7 trillion. So how are we going to care for 7 billion people? That's the world's population. A number of years ago, I went out to Chengdu. If you've been there, that's where the pandas live. And that's where West China Hospital Sichuan University is. Now, if you'll note on the map, Chengdu, even though called West China, is not in West China. If you look at the map, it's in the middle. That's because everything to the west is pretty much no man's land. And people come to Chengdu from the west for their care, and sometimes they have to get on a train and go for 2 nights on a train to get there. And these are the crowds waiting to get in the clinics, and these are the crowds waiting to get registered. The physical hospital itself looks like any hospital you would be happy to practice in. But when you go in, this is what I saw. These people have helmets on. And I sort of inquired, what's the story with the helmets? And they said, to protect the doctors. And I said, protect the doctors from what? And they said, protect the doctors from patients. And I said, what's the story? And it turns out that these people who come for multiple nights and finally get to the hospital, the average visit in that doctor's office lasts 7 minutes. And the doctor spends about 90 seconds of that time talking to the patient. So understandably, these patients get upset. In fact, there was an article even in the New Yorker about this. And it turned out there were some murders of physicians. This is a couple of years ago. It's not, I think things are probably better, but they've learned. And what they did is the People's Daily, which is the mouthpiece for the Communist Party in China, they put out an online questionnaire asking readers to rate their reaction to the murder as a smiley face, a sad face, or an angry face. And guess what? 65% of the readers chose the smiley face. This is kind of bordering on weird, right? They took that down, obviously. This is the largest hospital in the world, Chengdu Hospital, 10,200 beds. You can see the other statistics. That's what it looks like. Really nice, huh? It looks, you'd like to go there. Except the problem is patients don't come alone. They come with their families. And this is one of the unintended consequences. This is in the hallway of that hospital, patients, families, members just out there. And this is outside the hospital in the street where they don't have a chance to go to a hotel. We just lay down out on the parking lot. Well, I will submit that this is not the way that we're going to care for 7 billion people. It's going to be distributed health care. And you heard some of the distributed systems that Jack Cronenwood told you about. But this isn't new. Concept, you might call it value-based care. It goes back, look at this, 1969. The existing deficiency in health care cannot be corrected by simply more personnel, more facilities, and more money. It's going to require organizing these people. Here when I was at Stanford, we were one of the early cradles of driverless cars. And initially this caused a lot of excitement and consternation among people, but after they're exposed for a while, many of the students were just simply blasé, and it was the people who were coming from the middle of the country in Iowa and bringing their kids out to the admissions office who were really kind of extremely unclear what was going on with driverless cars. And you'd often explain to them driverless cars, and that had to do this way. This are the number of sensors on a driverless car, a Google driverless car. And in reality, if you can have driverless cars and autonomous vehicles, it's not too far-fetched to think you can have doctorless medicine and autonomous care. With a visual sensor warning dashboard used of all these sensors we've been talking about and communicated to a control center. I'd like to talk more about some of the ways we're utilizing this, but in the limitation of times, I'll go on. But suffice to say, tech giants have transformed the way billions of us communicate, obviously, shop, socialize, work. Now they are accelerating their efforts to remake healthcare because the market is too big, too important, and much too personal to their users for them to ignore. All of these people are involved. And obviously they come at it from different points of view, but almost all of them share a common thread, and that's data management. Let's look at Amazon and Jeff Bezos. We know Whole Foods is out there, and you may have known if you've gone into Whole Foods recently, they're starting to put primary care facilities in those Whole Food markets. Obviously, Jeff Bezos, Jamie Dimon from J.P. Morgan, Warren Buffett from Berkshire Hathaway have joined together. In the last couple of weeks I saw they just coined the name for that conglomerate that they finally put. It's called Haven, H-A-V-E-N, and you can guarantee that they're going to be there along with Jeff Bezos, PillPack, etc. And these are all of the opportunities that Amazon could bring to potentially disrupting how healthcare services are delivered. I saw this a while back, and it was obviously everyone's trying to get HIPAA compliant, whether you're Alexa or Cortana. You have to be HIPAA compliant if you're going to do this. And this was an ad, and it was talking about they wanted a HIPAA compliant lead, and over here they had this thing which said Alexa information. And of course, various newspaper and journalists saw that, and they immediately knew what was going on, and Amazon removed that because they were trying to be stealth in what they were doing and not let the competition in on everything. But now it's out, the cat's out of the bag. All sorts of here, Merck and Alexa are working together. They have a diabetic challenge. There are a number of third-party Alexa apps from various, not only private concerns, but healthcare delivery systems like Mayo Clinic. And why is that? Because MACRA, we're expanding payments. You know, the payment for a virtual visit is now the same as the payment for an in-person visit. And you can see that new billing codes for prolonged preventative services are coming. The telemedicine reimbursement is beyond rural areas and outside of healthcare facilities, and it's going to move not only to diagnosis and monitoring, but obviously to combining that with therapeutic adherence. All of these technology platforms can be matched with all of these different project domains. So all of these technologies here can play in all of these potential applications. And that, again, is causing a massive growth in the telehealth market. Well, let's close up with, I think, the gorilla in the room, which is AI machine learning. But we'll take a little, I think, detour quickly into VR, AR. How do we use that? I'll show you a specific application that we've adopted. I think these immersion platforms have great potential, and you should think about how you might be able to apply it in vascular surgery in your own practices. This is a company called Applied VR. They actually have a VR pharmacy, and here's one of the applications.
We've been using virtual reality initially in phlebotomy, which is where the kids come routinely for outpatient blood draw, and we're using it in a randomized controlled trial. And what we do is we engage the child in a fun, playful game. It's called Bear Blast. This is a game that we are collaborating with Applied VR to develop and to validate a gaming environment that's going to decrease pain and anxiety. My understanding about why it works is that it really engages the brain biologically so that the frontal lobes are actually inhibiting the signal that's coming in by shutting off the incoming pain signal at that spinal level so that it never reaches the child's brain or perception or experience. We've had kids who've said things to us like, you know, when are you going to do it? And we've already completed the blood draw while they were playing the virtual reality game. There are definitely times where they don't experience any pain or any discomfort or any knowledge of the fact that the blood draw is happening. To even think that maybe in someday kids might look forward to getting their blood draw because they get to play the virtual reality game would be a great goal for us.
Okay, AI. I think we all know that isolated data has advanced past the complex network data, and now complex computational data is something that we deal with all the time, and we're actually poised to cross this threshold into the zettabyte era. At the University of Arizona, we sequence in our cancer center 300 patients a day. Each one of those patient events generates 4 terabytes of data. Well, how do we do that? Well, we do it simply because it's cheap. I mean, you can see these two curves crossing between the cost of calculations and the utility of the data consumption. And because of this, this is what drives it. It's very inexpensive to do this. We just have to build a big enough server farm. And again, now comes the really hard part. How are we going to drive precision medicine and data-driven healthcare into routine clinical practice? You're aware of some of these more obvious imaging applications of AI, whether it's pathology, radiology, melanoma detection, dermatology, ophthalmology. But how would we use this in vascular surgery or interventional radiology, where we're more procedurally based and not so much image-based? And I think what we're looking for is the way we're going to use this to help deep phenotype people, to really do molecular profiling that can be combined with outcomes data, socioeconomic and social determinant data, and then map these genetic codes. Here's, for example, is the genetic overlap between stroke and related vascular traits at 32 genome loci for stroke that were profiled in over 500,000 people. This is how we're going to go forward. This is really going to help, and you saw from Jack Cronenwith some of the other great advantages of data. And what it allows us to do is really get beyond the bandwidth limit of human individuals. I mean, obviously we're not able to discern patterns in 500,000 individuals. We can't keep track of any of that. And as you can see here, one thing a person cannot do, no matter how rigorous his analysis or how heroic his or her imagination, is to draw up a list of things that would never occur to him. And that's the way. So we have to, once these patterns become obvious and conspicuous, we can use our own human ingenuity to apply them to better ways to treat patients' disease. And this is what we're going to see, this building a learning healthcare system through machine learning and artificial intelligence. CEO of Kaiser Permanente. I don't think any physician today should be practicing without artificial intelligence. assisting in their practice. It's just impossible otherwise to pick up on patterns, to pick up on trends, to really monitor care. And again, the health AI market, like the other markets in telemedicine, et cetera, is exploding before our eyes. CEO of Google, AI is one of the most important things humanity is working on. It's more profound than electricity or fire. We have learned to harness fire for the benefits of humanity, but we had to overcome its downsides too. AI is really important, but we have to be concerned about it. And I think this probably cartoon and cafe discussion sort of, I think, nicely sort of, I think, summarizes how many of us may feel about big data and AI. Obviously, there are concerns about data sharing. We heard some of those. Obviously, confidentiality. Just because I hate you doesn't mean I don't love you. And this is going to change how we educate our trainees without a doubt. Obviously, we've gone, if you've looked at the phases of education, we're now clearly moved from this phase out to here to escalating complexity and teaching our students how to really know what fake news is, what statistics and data matter and what don't. This is actually, he's now at the University of Arizona at all things, of 92 years of old. He's one of our professors, and I heard him at the book festival a month ago say, if you're teaching today what you were 5 years ago, either the field is dead or you are. And obviously we can get a lot of CME through Alexa and others, and you as a society might want to think about that as a delivery method for continuing medical education. And in general, we're going from this hypothesis-driven dominant research paradigm, which is sort of, I call it the R01 desert, if you will, to something else. So we have the 4S model, which is single investigator, single discipline, single institution, and slow, to the 4M model, which is multi-investigator, multi-discipline, multi-center, and millions. Because that's the only way we're going to solve the problems that face us all today. So a digital Darwinism may be looming, and I would just suggest to you that you consider that institutions lacking adequate computational infrastructure and critical mass in data analytics will suffer cognitive starvation and relegation to competitive irrelevance. But keep calm and remember you're not alone. You can create innovative joint projects, and here's where it all comes together, where precision medicine and digital medicine, you can find a home. You just have to look, and you have to be curious. So will new technology and innovation help us reduce disease and prolong our lives? Well, there's no shortage of hype, but many believe the entire practice of medicine can be revolutionized by technology. And will it allow us to successfully address what I think is the grandest challenge of our age, and that's health inequity? So that's not a revolution for just the few, but rather that the changes enabled by technology will be distributed fairly to help the majority? How will it play out? Well, oftentimes I'm faced in a situation, like I'm sure many of you are, where we are just absolutely don't know what to think. And when I see something like this, it's very daunting to me. All of these different communications, now digital health, big data, and precision health interconnect. So this has been my modus operandi when faced with this. It's basically, when I'm in doubt, I just keep quiet and act as if I know what I'm doing. It's worked for me on a number of times. So, as we go forward, because if not you, who? If not now, when? We are in a period of great innovation. Opportunities will continue to grow with technological advances that promise to impact clinical medicine and clinical practice and transform medicine. No doubt the pace of change is rapid. Thinking outside the box is essential. The potential impact of medical care is enormous, but always remember, have fun as you prepare for these inevitable developments. Thank you very much.